Welcome back to the Mental Playbook Podcast. I'm here with Cindi Miller, former D1 athlete, therapist, and licensed mental health counselor, as well as mindset coach for athletes. Thank you so much for joining me. I am really excited for you to be here and to talk about kind of your journey as an athlete and now as a therapist.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, specifically for athletes as well. So I think that's really
Mhm.
interesting. So you went from a college volleyball player in Division 1 to
Mhm.
a coach to a therapist. How did each chapter kind of shape the way you help and support athletes today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew from a young age that I wanted to get away. I am from a small town in Indiana, so I started to look for schools that I was interested in way outside. So I was recruited by UNC Asheville. Decided to play volleyball in college. I also played basketball in high school and loved that too. Uh, and while I was playing, I learned so much about myself, so much about like how I've kind of always pushed through injuries, pushed through like my own needs, that sort of thing. And ever since I was like 18, I coached club volleyball while I was a college athlete. I would like go to the track camps and work those when I was in high school. I was constantly coaching. So I got my undergrad degree in psychology. And as soon as I graduated, my intention was like, okay, I'm going to go to grad school, get my master's in counseling. That has been from, my first AP Psych course that I took in high school. I was like, that's what I want to do. And when I was given the opportunity to be a grad assistant for a program, one of the assistants quit right before season and for very valid reasons, like, with family stuff. And I had already applied with the coach, with the athletic director, and they were like, hey, do you just want the job? And I think any young 20-year-old's gonna be like, sure, I'll take the job. I loved coaching. I was like, yeah, I can see what that looks like. And little did I know that I was going to do that for 6 more years. So I did about a year at Winthrop University and then followed the head coach to East Carolina University, where I was there for 6 seasons. Um, Sprinkled along that journey was recognizing how I was not equipped to handle some of the stuff that the college athletes were going through. And not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't care, but because like they were dealing with some like hard stuff and they'd plop themselves in my office. And I just felt like, I'd try to refer out, and there were no therapists who had evening appointments, who understood the athlete lifestyle. Where, a lot of people outside of the athletic realm, like if you're miserable, if you're hating your sport, if you're, struggling with anxiety, the easiest answer is to quit.
Hmm.
But athletes, we know that's not always the case. We can like hate a day of practice and still want to play, or right, it's such a ingrained part of one's identity. So I was flying home from a recruiting trip. I can still remember it was from Denver, Colorado. I was flying back and I was like, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna go to grad school. And Immediately went to my boss, said, hey, this is what I'm looking at. I think I'm gonna go to a different school. And she was like, what if you become our grad assistant? Um, so I actually did the reverse. I became a grad assistant after 5 years of coaching experience, and got my degree at East Carolina University, which was very cool because I continued to work with the volleyball team and got to implement some of the skills I was learning and work with the team on a totally different level. Um, and so becoming a therapist, I specialized in eating disorders fresh out of my graduate program because athletes are at a 4 times higher rate of the in the general population of getting an eating disorder, of developing an eating disorder. And I really wanted that experience and that knowledge. So I shifted into the higher levels of care of that work so I could really immerse myself. And then 4 years ago, I entered private practice, where here I am today working with current athletes and actually a lot of former athletes who are recognizing some of their time management, anxious, like expectations of self, perfectionism showing up in their work, in their family life, where they're not participating in sport anymore,
Right.
but totally seeing some of those patterns.
Yeah, you brought up something really interesting. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about is when you're really passionate about a sport, but sometimes you can be in this negative team environment or something's kind of going on, that's affecting your mental health. It's so hard to kind of get out of that environment or just make a choice on what to do. So I'm curious to know that if you're an athlete struggling
Mm-hmm.
with negative environment. Maybe it's your coach, maybe it's your teammates, or just something that's going on with anxiety. How do you navigate that experience
Mm-hmm.
and that in
Yeah. I think there are multiple ways to navigate it, and I really like to encourage people to look at the entire picture. So there are different facets of our life, and sports should not be the entirety. And so if you are, for example, at a college, a university where the team dynamic's not really great, the coaching isn't what you thought it was, or they kind of put on a really good face during your recruiting visit. Um, and you love the school and you've got accepted into the honors program and they have your exact degree, you can look at like, okay, do I quit the sport? Do I tolerate the sport and kind of work on some what I call like diffusion, separating myself from like the toxicity or the negativity? Do I transfer? Do I find somewhere else to go? There's this whole hoopla right now of like lots of people thinking that the transfer portal is harming college sports, and I completely disagree. I think coaches have been able to do it their entire, of the existence of college sports, and so if you're not happy, um, transfer. Cool, that's awesome. Now, I will say, like, if you go to a second school and you're not happy there, okay, maybe it's time to look inward of like what's going on, right? Is it depression, anxiety, stuff that is just going to follow you everywhere? Is it the environment? There's just so many factors, so I don't think I can give you a direct answer of the fact that I think like there is no right answer. It's very situational and personal to, I had someone who wasn't super happy on a team, but she was close to family and needed to be because she had someone who was sick in the family. Like there are so many different situations that it's truly what's best for you. And I think sometimes that gets misaligned with like team first mentality, like stay for your team. That's not going to be your team forever. And yes, like that would be lovely. And you have to do what's best for you. And you're going to be a better teammate if you're happy and you're content.
right? And sometimes our identity can be kind of intertwined with our sport. How do we make sure to separate, our values and identity, I guess, from our sport?
Yeah, I think that one is such a huge hurdle to cross when finishing, whether that be finishing high school, finishing college, whatever it may be, this transition is a make or break time where you learn if you've made it your whole identity, right? If your sport ends and you're like, what do I do now? Who do I say I am, right? Hi, I'm Cindi and I'm a volleyball player, right? Like, hi, I'm Cindi and I am a student and I like kayaking and right like so the separation needs to start sooner, not as we're preparing to end. And in high schools, colleges, they're starting to implement like, hey, what's life outside of sport look like? But it's only for the seniors, it's only for the upperclassmen, and sometimes that's too late. So it's great that it's happening, but I'm also of the camp of like, let's do it from the start. Like the day you step foot on campus, you are starting the grief process of what it'll be like to be done one day, which is kind of my hippy dippy version of like every start is the finish of something else, right? And like we're constantly evolving and changing. And so um, for kind of some tangible things, I encourage athletes to do things outside of sports. Some people join band, some people are in clubs, some people do different sports for fun. Um, some people do some coaching, that sort of thing. Maybe studying is a part of your identity, being a good student, and just making sure that you also have friends outside of sport. Because, you're with your teammates, then you go to dinner and you're with your teammates, then you go to sleep over and you're with your teammates, and then you wake up and breakfast. And that can make it really hard to separate yourself from the team when you're doing all the things together. So I also encourage people to really expand, connect with different classmates who aren't athletes, maybe, so that you can kind of also hear the outside world too, because athletics can be quite the bubble sometimes.
Yeah, I've had some friends who are athletes and they've always been kind of tied to their sport or they'd be doing like going to dinner with their teammates. So that can be a challenge, especially at a
Hmm.
young age. I'm
Yeah.
sports is always evolving. What are some of the most common mental health challenges you see today?
Mhm. So eating disorders, of course, because we live in a world full of what we call diet culture and this pursuit of thinness equaling health, and especially with athletics, specific to female athletes, there is a study out there, and I can't even give it to you, so take this with a grain of salt, but it is somewhere upwards of like 70 to 80% of female athletes are undernourished when society outside of sport or even in sport is saying you need to eat less, you need to be smaller, when we actually know it's the opposite in a lot of ways. So, eating disorders, disordered eating, very common in athletics. One thing that I'm seeing a lot more of is this, like, and maybe it's just evolving because of social media, but like perfectionism and the striving for the app to be the absolute best in on paper, that doesn't seem like a bad thing, right? Like I'm striving to be the best. However, what it happens is you start to let go of things that no longer feel important to you. You isolate, you stop seeing friends, you spend way too much time. You might be at a high risk for over injury. If you don't win, you're a loser, right? Like there's no idea of growth. And I think some of that, like I said, comes from social media because we see everyone's highlight reel, right? Or if I'm watching a professional athlete, I'm like trying to compare myself to them. Like, oh, they never mess up. But like, they didn't post when they were 15 and first starting out, right? And so some of that happens, I think, too, and not even just professional, but different levels of sport or so I think social media is kind of speeding that up, if you will, of this like pass fail or success fail environment.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We are always seeing the finish line rather than the journey and kind of like you said,
Hmm.
the challenges that each person has kind of faced and had to overcome. And another thing with social media is body image. So
Hmm.
it's that can maybe be the cause, I don't know, of eating disorders. Can you talk about um, how do you approach conversations around body image or just disordered eating in a way that feels supportive and not so much shame-based, even if it's through?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I introduce everything through curiosity. And I think that's a really safe place for other people. I have quote unquote permission as an eating disorder, like therapist. I can be like, hey, I think this is a problem, right? Where someone else might become a little bit more defensive. We know too, if they're following a plan that says this is totally fine, there's going to be some like resentment or some defensiveness that comes up if like a teammate or a loved one like is confronting a situation of concern. Um, and the way that social media is we're seeing now, I just saw floating around like this is an AI reporter reporting a completely erroneous, right? Like, and so that's new, but Photoshop, all of those body apps that you can change everything about you, those have been around for a decade more, right? And so we're also, not only are we seeing the finish line, we're also seeing distorted images if we're not super curious and, taking the time to investigate, I guess is the right word. And so it is hard to tell someone, hey, your body is just fine, the way it is, when there is an entire like trend on social media to tell you how awful your body is. And so I like to personally turn, you know, finding kind of body neutrality or um, just kind of like, again, contentment with one's body. I like to kind of create a language around that being pretty rebellious. Like the world wants you to change. And it's actually defiant and a bold step to be okay with the skin that you're in. And that doesn't, oftentimes because in the same way of like if I don't win, I lose. When I say, "Hey, you can have some Reese's peanut butter cups every so often," what people want to or choose to hear is that's all you should eat, and you should never eat vegetables a day in your life, right? Um, and really, we just want to find peace with food. Food
Mhm.
is to nourish us. Food is also to celebrate. Food is so much more than just gas in our tank, right? I always tell people like when we have a new baby, a new neighbor, like any of these like celebrations, like birthday, what is it? It's around food. We're bringing food, right? Because that is a global um, offering of care. We know that food is way more than just that nutrition. And so athletes sometimes get the message of you need to fuel your body, which is absolutely accurate. We do need to fuel our body appropriately. But a lot of the times is it enough is the first question.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what would you tell a high school or college athlete who's really feeling pressure, either from themselves or from other people, to look a certain way, or you even brought up perfectionism to
hmm
have perfect performance in their sport?
Yeah. I would ask them first, do you think perfect is attainable? Because even perfectionists know that, and what I call it is the forever moving goalpost, right? So what happens in perfectionism is success is the expectation. So there's no celebrating when you achieve something. So with like performance and or weight or body size, when you get to a point, it's like, well, yeah, that's what I was working for. So like now I'm going to do 5 more pounds, or I'm going to not be happy until I win the state championship because I like regionals wasn't good enough now, even though I've never even come close to, winning the conference, whatever it may be, right? And so coming back around to the journey, how does it feel, right? How do you feel in your body from that point of view? Because I think that perfectionism shows up there. And, you know, why change your body if it's feeling good? How does it feel? Not just what it looks like. Now, if you're like, wow, I got some blood drawn at my latest physical and I have low iron and I have low, okay, maybe we need to add some green vegetables in, right? But it's about what to add in, not what to take out. The food that is, you know, I always say that like with salad, right? Everybody's heard if you put dressing on it, it's ruined, right? You've like ruined the salad. And if you're gonna not have vegetables because you don't like them, plain, eating the salad with dressing is the healthy choice, regardless of how unhealthy one thinks the dressing is, right? Because it doesn't like go down our throat and be like, oh, cancel out, no vitamins because we have some dressing that has some fat um, and so from that perfectionism lens, from the performance side of things, um, I really challenge individual athletes, like, what did you learn from this situation? Like, and I get a lot of eye rolls. Like, but I didn't win. But I still failed. I still messed up. All right, but what'd you learn? What could you do differently? What do you feel like you need to do for practice this week, right? And just reminding them, I also like to say, like, hey, what would like second grade you
Mm.
think right now? Like, yes, you lost the state championship for high school, but you're getting ready to go play in college. Like, would second grade you like be so amazed and so enamored and like come to all of your games to just like look up to you and be such a role model. And a lot of times we lose our why in the sport because we're just constantly going. We kind of get into a um, perpetual motion and we forget, oh yeah, this is something I'm supposed to enjoy.
Yeah. So how can coaches and parents create a safer space for athletes to open up about their, whether it's mental health or even
Mhm.
just disorders?
Mhm. Yeah. So coaches, I often am very direct with of like, stay in your lane. Unless you are a registered dietitian and coach, stay in your lane. And so the same thing goes for mental health, right? So there's the basic awareness of, hey, this person's now shutting down, they're not talking. Hey, this person is crying every time they mess up. That's anxiety. That's not you're weak. That's not, right? Like that's anxiety. Like they cannot mess up for fear of XYZ. So there's signs and symptoms that you can look for and having resources available to be able to refer to a therapist, to a coach, that sort of thing. And then from the parent's perspective, just being open to that, talking to maybe some older parents right now, potentially, that things are different than they were when you were a kid. And it doesn't mean that anxiety and depression didn't exist. It meant we didn't address it in the same way. And so now people are just talking about it more, which makes it seem like a trend or a fad. And nobody wants anxiety, depression, eating disorder. Like nobody wants that. Like, and so oftentimes I think that's a good reminder that it's just more safe to open up about it. It's not that your kids are now weaker than you were when you were a kid or, any type of that messaging. So offering from the jump a safe space. When I was coaching clubs, so the younger, like I think I did 15 and 16 is my last couple of years of coaching. I would tell them at the beginning, if you're having a rough day, let me know before practice starts. I'm not going to say sit out and go easy and you don't have to try. But I am going to be a little bit more aware and not maybe ride you during a drill if you're struggling, if you failed a test today, right? So there's finding balance in holding someone accountable and also being a compassionate human.
Yeah. So when performing in a sport, sometimes it can be hard to take criticism, to not take criticism personally, even when it's meant to help us grow. And there's kind of that boundary with criticism, whether it's a coach giving us feedback that's actually meant to help us improve. But then there's sometimes that coach telling us feedback that's kind of damaging to our confidence. So, what are some strategies athletes can use to either accept that positive feedback or kind of reject the thing that's kind of damaging our mental health? If that makes sense.
I like to tell athletes to always give your coach benefit of the doubt. Always assume positive intent. And that not might not always be the case, but a lot of the times we jump to they hate me, they're going to take me out, they don't get it, they think I suck, right? We jump to the negative. So if we jump to instead they want what's best for me, if we acknowledge that coaches are stressed too, particularly good, solid programs, high school and college, if you're not winning, you get fired. Your job is on the line. If you have children, if you have a family, like you might have to up and move, uproot your life, right? So there's a higher level of stress that coaches are under. And I think that's where I vacillate between that I was an athlete and I was a coach. So I understood both perspectives really well. And now, as a therapist, I'm able to also acknowledge, like, hey, maybe the coach is also scared or, is also worried, that sort of thing. And so give your coach the benefit of the doubt with tone, with intent. They meant for it to the best. All right. Now, if they're like berating you and calling you names, right? That's not the best intent. We're going to move on to the next step of what am I going to do about it? If I have to finish out the year, can I work to tune that out? Can I only listen to, can I ask my teammates to kind of be the, oh gosh, what's that game? The like, what's the game where we talk into a microphone and what's that like telephone? That's all. That's what it's called. It's not a hard game. But like, can I ask a teammate to kind of play the middleman and say, like, so if a coach is saying, you freaking suck. I can't believe you just did that. Can a teammate be like, hey, you've got the next one. Make sure you're going to the XYZ where we're supposed to, right? Like, can we have a buffer there? Because a lot of the times coaches, and this is not me defending coaches, but a lot of the times they don't know what they're actually saying in the heat of the moment. And that doesn't mean it's okay. They need to become aware of it. But a lot of coaches do lose their head when they're in intense moments. And so that's where like the not taking things personal comes in. It's not pretending what they said is okay. It's acknowledging that if they're that heated, that they're saying like, cursing at you or calling you names or telling you how much you suck, that's their stuff,
Mhm.
not yours, right? And so building up kind of a boundary bubble, as I call it, of, you know, protection around those negative kind of feedback. And then that flip side of positive intent. If you're just like terrible, most people who are perfectionists are terrible at receiving even constructive criticism because it feels like you're telling me I am bad when actually it's like I think you're good and I want you to be better. Um, and so seeing the good, the like giving benefit of the doubt is a good way to start that.
Yeah. What are some tools you teach athletes to help manage anxiety or pressure, especially when it's like game day?
Mhm. I do a lot of visualization. So, no matter what your sport is, giving yourself, I don't really recommend it right before you perform because some people can get really sleepy when you're kind of daydreaming and such. But imagining the thing that maybe you're most self-conscious about, I'll use volleyball as an example. The score is 25-24 and I need to make this serve, right? I'm going to visualize making that serve and I'm going to do it 5 to 10 times where I'm successful and I'm finishing with my teammates cheering. It's not just the serve. I'm playing that whole rally out. I'm playing that whole scene out in my head because we know that confidence is an inside job, right? Not just from if because I made four serves before that, it's I have confidence that I can do it now, right? Because each time is different, each score is different. The anxiety, that sort of thing comes from that. I also think talking with teammates is important about their anxiety. You feeling worried, you feeling concerned. Sometimes it can be important to like check, kind of use like your teammates as a mirror. Like, should we be this anxious? No, no, I'm cool. Like, we've got this. We're good. Okay, right? Needing that just kind of like confirmation. Um, really, really hard practices, or, you're getting your uh back end, crushed at halftime and you're in the locker room like you look around and are other people feeling that so you can kind of feel validated in the feeling because anxiety in and of itself is there to help us. It's trying to protect us, it's trying to help us navigate this nerve-wracking situation. What happens is we kind of can go past the threshold where it's then detrimental. So talking with teammates, um, positive self-talk. I I say it's positive, but I'm also of the camp. You heard me talk about body neutrality. I think neutrality is important in sport too. If I miss a free throw, I'm not going to say I'm never missing a free throw again because you make all your free throws, because that's just not true. Nobody does, even the best shooter in the whole wide world, right? And so I'm going to say I know how to do this. I've practiced this, right? I'm validating the effort that I've put in, not the outcome. So visualizing, self-talk, talking with teammates, and then also just checking in of like if you're anxious every single day, if you're feeling depressed and like so nervous to go to practice every day to show up for games, do you want to play this sport? I don't think we ask that question enough. And it's not a you should just quit. It's my why. Why am I playing? You know? Is it just a season, right? Where this coach is going to be on their way out so I can see a future that's going to be different. Or maybe I'm like, no, I don't want to play. I have no passion for it. I was just playing because my friends were. That's okay too. And so I think putting that on the table almost gives people like a sigh of relief of like, that is an option. There is an exit if you want it. And even just having the exit is sometimes enough to lower the anxiety.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes we can feel a certain way and feel like we're the only one feeling that way.
Hmm.
How you said, like checking in on how your teammates are feeling and kind of mirroring that. That's something
Yeah.
that I haven't really heard.
Yeah. Good.
Um, so oftentimes we don't always win. How do you help athletes process, whether it's a personal loss or just the team's loss in a more healthy and productive way?
It's a very fine line between letting things go and seeming like you don't care. And so there's a lot of athletes that kind of cosplay anger, if you will, of like I'm supposed to punch my seat and slap myself down and, put my towel over my head and look depressed because I'm so angry that this just happened. Where if I'm the other team, I'm seeing that like you've lost your like any type of emotion regulation and I'm gonna go for you the next half or the next game or right like because you've lost your cool. And then there's the flip side where I've also seen, people make a mistake and they just like laugh about it. And they're like, oh, no big deal, right? And so there's this fine line of recognizing that one, we're not going to always win. I look at, I'm watching the WNBA right now and think that I'm in Indiana, so Fever's on all the time, and they were 3-0, and like when they lost to the Liberty, people were like, "Oh my gosh, they lost. They're not going to be as good." I'm like, it's literally they're 3-1. They've played 4 games. Like they should lose. Like this league should be competitive. They should lose sometimes. We don't want dominant performances all the time, and when we do, the loss is that much more important, right? Like again, UConn basketball had the women's team had like 3 years of undefeated. Like they were like 108 and 0 or something like that. Finally lost. Guess what? They talked about the streak forever. They stopped talking about how great of a team that was in the present moment. Like just because they lost 1 game. Um, I also like to show there are, yes, on what we put on social media is our highlight reel. YouTube has people have a lot of time on their hands, and you can type in one of your favorite athletes and say their bloopers or their mistakes or their failings, and they probably do it maliciously, but I think it's a great thing to go look at sometimes as a good reminder that even the top professional athletes have coaches, still practice, still mess up, still do silly mistakes, because we're human and that's going to happen. And so, um, losing for me is that very cliche, like you either win or you learn. Like, I get it. Losing sucks sometimes, like, especially when it's like in as a therapist now, I have this whole spiel of our therapist speak of like two things can be true at the same time. We can be upset that we lost and acknowledge that the team was better maybe, or that we could have performed differently, but beating myself up all the way home isn't going to change the outcome, you know, or looking at like, if I messed up a specific skill, I can go practice it for 15, 20 minutes. If I do it for an hour, I might risk injury. I might, risk fatigue, things like that, that like it's always about finding the balance. I use a lot of metaphor around like a pendulum, and we want to be like here. And a lot of the times we're swinging a little bit too far. And so if we're finding just kind of like a back and forth, I'm a little upset that we lost. Like that sucks. I want to get better. I want to win. And on the flip side, like I also don't want to be like, oh, who cares if we win or lose? Like at least we got pizza afterwards or whatever, right? If it's not about the performance at all, then we're trying to find that middle ground.
Yeah, I love that pendulum metaphor. That reminded me of both our mental and physical health and how
Hmm.
can we, whether we're athletes or even just individuals, make sure we're checking in on both our mind and our body. And it's not always 50-50, right? Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, how do we kind of balance both our physical and mental health?
Yeah. I think the physical health side of things often gets the crown of what's deemed health. And from a whole body perspective. We have social health, we have physical health, we have mental health, we have emotional health, we have spiritual health, we have financial health, we have, right? Like all of these things that come into play. And physical health often is like, oh, are you healthy? Like people mean your labs, your vitals, right? Is your heart rate at a good, right? But healthy is so much broader than that. And so I had talked about how like the facets for identity, there's so many different parts. I will have people, sometimes it's a pie chart, sometimes it's a graph, whatever I decide, but divide all of those healths into sections. And if I am giving all of my attention to my physical health, at some point it's going to be detrimental to my emotional, my mental, and potentially my social health, right? Like that sort of thing. And our physical health, sure, it's important. We know this to be true. And it's not always within our control. Injuries, ailments, genetic conditions, autoimmune stuff. Like there are things that are you can be in the most peak shape, uh, and still your physical health can be taken from you in an instant, right? Which is why it's so important to have a solid foundation of all of those other different types of health so that you can manage when your physical health may go. Injuries for athletes are very, very, very hard because it takes away that identity, but it also is like, now what? Well, there's actually a lot of other things that we can, focus on while you're out potentially. Um, Yeah, I'm trying to think of if I answered your question. Did I
Yeah.
answer your question? Okay.
It's difficult when it's out of your control. So, what are some of your tips, especially when you're dealing with an injury? Like, what do you
hmm
do when you're sitting on the sideline and your team is playing without you?
hmm It is one of the best unfortunate situations when you cannot be in. There's a part of you that lets go of any resentment that you're not playing, right? Like if you're just on the bench because you're behind someone or, whatever reason, there's a little bit of resentment regardless of what you feel or say out loud. Like there just naturally is. You want to be on the field, right? On your playing surface. Um, but when it's out of your control, you're like not even dressed out, right? You're in like street clothes because you're injured. And there is such a good perspective to be had from sitting on the bench kind of playing an assistant coach, right? Like seeing what you don't see. I absolutely loved when my athletes coached younger club athletes, like so in college, they would come to practice and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Cindi, like I told them to stand here and they stand here, or I told them to do this and they did this." And I'm like, "I know, because sometimes our awareness is just not there." So when you're on the bench, you're like, oh, I see that they never do this thing that coach is constantly writing them about or whatever. So one is shifting your mindset into the like learning the X's and O's of the game, the strategy of the game, the encouragement of the game. Like there's so many other things that you can do if you are out from injury that can be helpful to the team.
Yeah. And what does resilience look like in your work, and how can athletes start to build that now?
Resilience, I think, is sometimes, a phrase that I don't like very much is everything happens for a reason. Because I think there are really crap things that happen to people that, like, you could have learned your lesson by not having that really awful thing happen. And in the same breath, when things do happen, you have a choice. It can define you. That can be where your story, your chapter ends, right? Or you can choose to overcome whatever situation that is, whether it be getting benched, an injury, whether that be a new coach, whether that be mental health. I think sometimes there's almost a fear of letting go of I'm the injured one if I've been out for a long time, because when you come back, you're gonna not be as good as you were. And
Mhm.
that sucks, right? Or I've been going to therapy because I'm the sick one. I've got anxiety, right? Coming back and being like confident, people are like, oh, who are you? Right? Because we don't allow evolution because we see people in one way, right? If you've ever gotten the like, you haven't seen somebody and you said you just graduated, if you had a graduation party,
I haven't had one, but.
You
Celebrate.
got, okay, a celebration. Okay. I know all those situations you see people that you haven't in a long time and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're graduating." And you're like, "Well, I am of age and I did do all the right." But if they've only saw you since, you were in the sixth grade, that's when they see you as, right? So bringing that back to when we identify and label people as like, again, the injured one, right? So when you come back, you should be back to the superstar, but that's not true. You're actually now 5 months behind or whatever, and that's okay. But you have to also be accepting of that. That's resilience. That's the ability to recognize that, like, cruddy things can happen to us and we can make choice as to what to do next,
Yeah.
and so it's that finding that balance of recognizing that, like, again, it's not normalizing or saying that we should just go through trials and tribulations all the time, because I think we can also learn when good things happen. But resilience in and of itself is recognizing some of that, like not taking things personal, separating self from outcome. I do this a lot, right? This is that like boundary bubble that I talked about of what's best for you.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that saying where it's like you can't control what goes on in your life, but you can control how you react to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's absolutely true. Um, because you can't control other people. We like to try, but we can't.
Great. So with
Yeah.
all the work that you do, what is your mental playbook that keeps you going?
Is my I think curiosity is probably the thing that I fall back on all of the time. I am curious about negative people. Why are they the way that they are? What happened earlier in the day that they just treated me like that? I really try to view everything through curiosity. So trying to think of another example where instead of just jumping to conclusions, I'm asking why. I'm asking what happened. I'm guessing how this came to be. And so I would say curiosity is probably would be like the title of my playbook of, what can we learn more from the situation? And compassion in there too, of like, I see all these like memes and stuff of if hating your body worked, like, wouldn't you love your body by now? Or if, punishing, we know that punishment is not successful in development. So if you are mentally punishing yourself every time you mess up, you could potentially holding yourself back. So why am I punishing myself? Where did I learn that? How can I overcome that? Whose voice do I hear? Um, I'm constantly asking myself questions. I probably ask myself questions like 100 questions a day.
I like that. It's interesting though, because sometimes I think about like maybe this is just personal, but like when bad things happen to good people, we often think like, why did that happen? There's a lot of
Mhm.
curiosity within that, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, and not really the answer to why are these things happening, but how
Mhm.
we can perceive it differently, and kind of there's always different sides to it, and it kind of goes back to
Mhm.
that thing where not everything happens for a reason, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes an answer to a question can be because we're human, because we live on the planet that we do, that we in the timeline that we do right now. For like the bad things happening to good people, or right, like the questioning can become existential if we choose it to be. Why would that happen to them? What are they going to learn from it, right? There's a lot of religious component that can come into like purpose and that sort of thing. And it's also okay to be like, because the world is crappy
Mhm. It's not.
sometimes, right? It's not perfect. And, I think that that is also an okay answer sometimes, where a lot of the times we're looking for a solution, we're looking for an exact reason. And that reason may come 20 years later, where they meet someone who also had this bad thing happen. And now this person has someone to look up to that overcame, right? Like, but you're not thinking that when that bad thing happened to you in the moment or when that thing happened, and you're not living your life like looking for your purpose. A lot of the times it just falls in your lap.
Yeah, I like that. So if you could give your college athlete self one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's not that deep, and getting older is not as bad as we like to think it is. And it's not that deep in the sense of I was one of the athletes who made it my entire identity and was very, very enveloped into who I was being, how I performed. And so it's not that deep comes into like you can still like to win and have a life and not have all these rules for yourself and all these things. And then also that like how many times people are like, oh, like college is the best 4 years of your life. Like maybe, but that's also really depressing if we think about it. Like, so when you graduate, like it's only downhill from now. Like, why? It can be great 4 years, and also I can look forward to my next 40, my next 50. So that's the piece too of like, it's not as bad as everyone says when you're, you know, 18 to 21, that like, oh, when you hit 25, oh, when you hit 30, oh, when you hit life can get better if you choose to
Yeah.
allow it.
And everyone has a different experience, kind of what you brought up
Hmm.
about college. Like, and even I just finished my high school. A lot of people were
Hmm.
saying, like, oh, this was the best experience. I had the best high school experience, but not everybody has that. So,
Hmm.
my last question for you is what matters most to you, the destination, the journey, or the company?
Hmm. I am going to say the journey because I think the company can change throughout that journey. And I think that the destination can change depending on the company and, you know, things that pop up along the way. So the journey for me is very, very important. And I have a tattoo that says be here now, and I'm very much a present moment perspective kind of person of if we aren't enjoying our now, we'll never be happy because we're going to be constantly chasing. And so I firmly believe that if we're not, we can still strive for different while also being like, I got what I worked for
Yeah.
5 years ago. I'm happy that I'm in this state right now or whatever, right? So definitely a destination person. I mean, sorry, a journey person.
We can be so focused on the future or something that happened in the past, like even if we're an athlete, focusing on like,
Hmm.
oh, I missed that shot or something like that. So I love that you said that, staying in the present, because there's
Hmm.
a lot of good that can come out of it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cindy, for joining me on the Mental Playbook podcast. To my listeners, mind strong, game on.